picture this. 110 luxuries suddenly sprouting on your property like mushrooms after rain. They built a suburb on my inheritance while I was abroad and had the nerve to hand me a flyer like I should be impressed. What used to be wildflower fields and tractor tracks, now it was Crown Ridge Estates. 110 beige boxes lined up like smug little soldiers guarding someone else's fortune. They built a tennis court on my inheritance, then charged me HOA fees to use it. The president? Toasting champagne, the lawyer calling it a clerical miracle. What they didn't know? I audit white-collar scams for breakfast. Where are y'all tuning in from today? Because this one's gonna make you spit your coffee. I got back from London expecting to see dusty roads and the wildflower field my uncle used to mow down with a tractor and a cold beer. Instead, I found Crown Ridge Estates. 110 homes, all beige and smug, lined up like soldiers guarding a lie. A woman in a blazer greeted me at the entrance with a flyer and a smile like Botox and bold font had a baby. "Would you like to hear about our Phase 3 incentives?" she chirped. "No thanks," I replied. "I'm not buying, I already own the land." She blinked, like I'd just ordered brisket at a sushi bar. "Oh, you must be mistaken." Mistaken? I've spent 15 years tracing ghost accounts and laundering schemes. I once found $2,600,000 0 cents hidden in a pizza franchise's rewards app. I don't do mistaken. What I do is follow paper trails. And the one under my boots was paved over my uncle's will. His 48 acres had turned into someone else's golf cart utopia, and I hadn't gotten so much as a phone call. I walked through the neighborhood like I was visiting my own funeral. Everyone looked at me like I was the outsider, but they were walking their dogs on my dirt, playing pickleball over my memories. Their mailboxes sat on soil I used to plant mesquite on, and they had the nerve to think I didn't belong. The HOA headquarters sat on a hill like it thought it was City Hall. Glass walls, fake fountain, receptionist with a "we don't do walk-ins" tone. "Miss Vale is expecting you," she said, as if this was a brunch reservation. Miranda Vale, HOA president. Age, probably mid-50s. Hair, aggressively silver. Smile, weaponized. The type of woman who collects bylaws like vintage wine and believes a clipboard is a personality. She didn't offer coffee, just a folder. "Mr. Chandler," she said smoothly, "we understand there's been some confusion." Inside the folder? Legal notices, HOA meeting minutes, and a full timeline of developmental transparency. Certified mail receipts sent to 427 Holloway, my uncle's house, the one that burned down 2 years ago. "You used an address you knew was invalid," I said. Miranda's smile didn't crack. "We're required to use the address on file," she replied, like a villain citing a technicality before the third act. "It's not our job to track down absentee heirs." Then she leaned in as if she was doing me a favor. "But we're open to compensation. Let's not make this adversarial." "Oh, Miranda, I wasn't here for a check. I was here for the receipts, the kind that don't come from Staples." I nodded politely, left her office without a word, and drove into town. By nightfall, I was elbows deep in public records. Because what she called protocol, I call pattern. And it was a pattern. Over a dozen properties in 5 years. Same lawyer, same developer, same dance. Elderly owners, forgotten plots, notices sent to ghost addresses, permits rushed through like it was a bake sale. HOA expansions built faster than city inspectors could spell easement. But this time, they messed with someone who reads financial statements like romance novels. They buried the truth in paperwork, not knowing I was the guy who reads footnotes for fun. Miranda Vale thought she'd built a tennis court. She didn't realize she'd laid the foundation for her own audit. And me? I wasn't confused. I was getting ready to tear her empire down, one fraudulent square foot at a time. Miranda Vale didn't smile. She showed teeth. Her office smelled like lavender and lawsuits, the kind of scent pumped into high-end retail to make you forget they're about to overcharge you. She gestured to the leather chair across from her like she was doing me a favor, not fielding a land fraud accusation. "Mr. Chandler," she said, syrupy and sharp, "we understand there's been some confusion. Lady, you put a tennis court where my uncle used to burn brush piles and then charged me HOA dues to use it. I didn't sit." I opened the folders she slid across the desk like it was a peace offering. Spoiler, it wasn't. Inside were certified mail receipts, HOA meeting minutes, and copies of legal notices that looked official until you noticed they were addressed to a post office box that had been bulldozed 5 years ago. "This is the address we had on file," Miranda said, blinking slowly like that explained everything. I held up the page like it smelled bad. "This address hasn't existed since before my uncle's last 4th of July barbecue." She didn't flinch. "We're required to notify the registered address. If the recipient fails to update their contact information, the responsibility doesn't fall on us." That's when I realized what I was dealing with. Not incompetence, not even carelessness. This was theater, legal choreography. Miranda was reciting lines she'd used before, many times, and I was just the next poor fool expected to applaud. The more I listened, the clearer it became. Crown Ridge wasn't just a development, it was a machine, and Miranda was its engine. She name-dropped HOA bylaws like scripture and pointed to signatures that looked suspiciously like they were written by the same hand on different dates. Everything we did was by the book, she insisted. I smiled politely. Sure, a book written in invisible ink and sold in the parking lot. Her nostrils flared, but the smile never cracked. The HOA had worked fast, too fast. Permits issued within days, construction launched without proper environmental sign-offs. The timeline didn't just raise red flags, it raised a parade of them. But Miranda counted on one thing, that I'd back down once she threw enough paperwork at me. She didn't know I eat paperwork for breakfast. Then came the name that made my ears perk up. Carson and Pyre. The HOA's legal muscle. I'd seen that firm in 2 congressional hearings and 3 settlements involving shady pipelines and mysteriously disappeared wetland reports. These weren't lawyers. They were bleach for dirty development. Their job wasn't to argue facts. It was to bury them. "You're welcome to take this up with our counsel," Miranda said, passing me a business card with raised gold lettering and no soul. I pocketed it and gave her my best accountant's grin. Flat, unreadable, just polite enough to be dangerous. "I think I'll do that," I said. Because now it wasn't just about my uncle's land. It was about how many other people Miranda had outmaneuvered, with a smirk and a certified letter sent to nowhere. As I walked out, I noticed the photos on her wall, shiny plaques, civic awards, a framed handshake with a state senator I wouldn't trust to water my plants. The whole office was curated like a LinkedIn profile. No fingerprints, no flaws. That's how I knew it was fake. HOA board meetings were scheduled for next Thursday. I'd be there front row, and this time I wouldn't just bring questions. I'd bring numbers, timelines, and, if I was lucky, a few angry neighbors with overdue HOA fees and overdue suspicions. Miranda thought she'd thrown me into the deep end of a gated community pool. She didn't realize I was the kind of guy who knows exactly what's buried under the concrete and how to make it rise to the surface. She stirred her coffee like it owed her money. Danielle Crest, 20-something, suit too big, eyes too tired, slid into the booth across from me like we were old friends meeting for pancakes. We weren't. She used to intern for Miranda Vale. Now she was burning that bridge like it was made of dry leaves and regret. "I don't have much time," she said, pulling a manila folder from her tote bag like it was wired for explosives. "But you need to see this." Inside? EOA documents, emails, financial records, and one line that stopped me mid-sip. Parcel 14 acquisition, same method as Parcel 8. Deceased owner, address defunct. Expedite permits. Turns out my family wasn't the first. We were number 13. Danielle leaned in, voice low and fast. "This has been going on for years. 12 other families before yours, elderly owners, deeds passed down. Then, poof, Notices sent to dead addresses. No objections? HOA claims it. They start building before the next of kin even finds out. She paused, hands trembling just enough to be honest. I found out 6 months in. Asked Miranda about it. She smiled like I was a puppy chewing on the Constitution. I looked at the folder again. Each property flipped to developers tied to the same LLC, same construction crews, same legal firm, different states, different victims, a pattern tighter than a drum, and about to burst. Then she handed me a letter. My name was on the front. The handwriting? My uncle's. I hadn't seen it in years, but I'd recognize it anywhere. Tight cursive, like every loop was made by someone who didn't waste ink or time. I opened it with shaking hands. Noah, if you're reading this, it means they finally made their move. I tried to stop them. I filed complaints, took notes, even hired someone to dig, but I knew I wouldn't live long enough to finish it. They think you won't fight. Prove them wrong. Underneath was a map of the property, our property, a red X marked by the old windmill with 2 words. The box. Danielle tapped the map. He buried it. I think it's a cache. Files. Audio, maybe? Something solid. Something that ties it all together. My breath caught. This wasn't just land. This wasn't even just fraud. It was personal. They hadn't just erased boundaries. They'd erased people. My uncle wasn't some clueless old man. He saw them coming. He laid the groundwork. And now I was holding the baton in a relay he never got to finish. Danielle saw it in my face. That's not even the big part, she said, sliding over another sheet. Geological survey, old and dusty, but stamped official. Your land sits on a helium reserve, deep pocket natural deposit, appraised just under 40 million. That's what they're after. Helium. Not balloons and party tricks. Industrial helium. Strategic supply stuff. Suddenly the tennis courts, the fast permits, the legal bulldogs, they all made sense. This wasn't suburban greed, it was a full-blown mineral land grab. Danielle looked around nervously. They think it's buried under red tape, but it's really buried under your feet. I looked at the note again. Prove them wrong. My uncle didn't just leave me acres. He left me a mission. Every house they built was a card stacked on fraud, and we were the wind coming in. And trust me, the next storm was just getting started. Danielle walked back into Miranda's office with a smile so polite it could have gotten hired at Chick-fil-A. To Miranda, she was the reformed intern begging for a second chance. To me, she was a human flash drive. Everything she heard, saw, or sniffed out came straight to my phone. I just want to be helpful again, she told Miranda sweetly. You always said I had potential. And Miranda, dripping with ego and ambition, welcomed her back like a queen rescuing a stray. What she didn't know? The stray had teeth and a mic crack under her blazer? The trap was set. All we needed now was the right audience and a little echo. That came in the form of Thursday night's town hall. I'd never seen a more aggressively beige building in my life, walls the color of guilt, carpet that muffled rebellion. The Crown Ridge Community Center was packed with residents who thought they were there for landscaping updates and dues talk. What they got? A front row seat to legal theater. I signed in like I was any other confused heir, just here to work something out. Danielle gave the signal. Miranda strutted up to the podium in a power suit that screamed, I redline people for fun. She started with small talk. We're so proud of our growth, she beamed. Phase 3 is ahead of schedule, and Crown Ridge continues to be a model of excellence. Sure, if your model was Enron with a picket fence. Then came the bait. I understand there's been some confusion over land ownership, Miranda said, turning slightly toward me like I was a child who'd wandered into traffic. Mr. Chandler, we'd love to resolve this amicably. I stood, putting on the best show of reluctant surrender you've ever seen. Look, I'm not here to cause problems. I just want what's fair. My uncle left me that land. I come back from London and suddenly there are houses on it? The room murmured, some sympathetic, most suspicious. I pulled a sheet from my folder. I'm told $200,000 0 cents is what you're offering for the land? Miranda nodded. It's generous, given the situation. I nodded back, sighed, and reached into my pocket. Then I pressed play. Her voice, cool, clipped, smug, filled the room through the Bluetooth speaker I'd synced up earlier. Of course we used the old address. Dead people don't file lawsuits, and the air was in another country. It's not fraud if no one's paying attention. For a full 3 seconds, silence. Then the air snapped. Someone gasped, another dropped a cup, and Miranda's face went from smug to, "I just sat on a cactus in under 5 seconds. That's taken out of context," she snapped. But the context was right there, in her tone, in the words, in the crowd that suddenly looked like it wanted refunds. HOA members were whispering, residents were rising. Security looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Turns out HOA bylaws don't cover accidentally confessed to fraud in public. I stepped forward, holding up a second paper. And here's a notarized report showing that same address she mentioned was condemned in 2016, which means every notice was knowingly undeliverable, which means every permit, every vote, every action taken under false notification is void. Someone shouted, "What else are you hiding?" Another yelled, "You used my grandma's name on a letter!" The town hall was no longer a meeting. It was a sermon with a legal grenade under the pulpit. Miranda tried to grab control, barking at the board, waving her hands, but no one followed. The spell had broken, and I wasn't finished. "This isn't about dirt," I said, calm and direct. "It's about power. About how easy it is to steal when nobody's looking, and how fast the game changes when someone starts looking back." Security tried to escort me out. 2 steps in, a father in cargo shorts blocked the aisle. "He stays." Another woman nodded. "Let him speak." The board sat frozen like a row of mannequins caught shoplifting. And Miranda? She was already texting someone. Maybe her lawyer, maybe her alibi, but the damage was done. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a turning point. The moment the homeowners stopped being clients and started being witnesses. And the best part? That was only Act 1. They thought I'd fold, that I'd show up to court with a wrinkled deed and a broken heart. Instead, I walked in with case law, a calm smile, and enough evidence to turn Crown Ridge Estates into a cautionary tale. You ever seen lawyers try to sprint in loafers? Hang tight, because this part gets juicy. The courtroom smelled like old books and fresh panic. Miranda Vale sat like a silver statue behind her legal dream team. 4 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and a PR rep with a fake tan, and a full meltdown in progress. I was alone at my table, just me and a binder thicker than their entire HOA playbook. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Honor Marla Eden, tapped her pen twice and nodded for me to begin. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and went for the jugular. "Your Honor," I said, flipping open to a tab marked in red. "According to Whitmore v. Henderson, 1896, any structure built on land without legal title reverts to the rightful landowner. No compensations, no exceptions." You could feel the room shift, like someone had cracked open a window in the middle of July. Miranda's lead counsel, some Harvard clone with too much gel and not enough poker face, objected. "Outdated case law," he grumbled. Judge Eden didn't even blink. "Still binding precedent in this jurisdiction," she said, turning to me. "Continue, Mr. Chandler." So I did. I cited McElroy v. State, 1951, Devlin Properties v. Carmichael, 1992, all reinforcing one thing: if you build on stolen dirt, you don't get to keep the house. Miranda shifted in her seat like her cushion was suddenly full of thumbtacks. I rolled out the receipts, the surveyor's report, the forged HOA mailings, the timeline that showed construction began before public notice ever hit the papers. It wasn't a case anymore, it was a demolition. By the time I was done, the judge was already highlighting pages in my binder. "Let me be clear," she said, adjusting her glasses. "You are asserting that all 110 homes in Crown Ridge were built illegally and therefore now legally belong to you?" "That is correct, Your Honor." The silence in the room could have been bottled and sold as tension concentrate. Miranda tried to stand, but barely made it halfway before blurting, "This is a setup!" Her voice cracked like a windshield in a hailstorm. "He's a con artist. This whole thing is a vendetta." The judge turned to her calmly. Mr. Vale, I'd advise you to sit, preferably quietly. The court stenographer paused for dramatic effect. Then the prosecution team, oh yes, they'd shown up too, stood and introduced Exhibit F, the HOA's own emergency filing from 2 weeks prior. Apparently, in her rush to block me from spreading misinformation, Miranda submitted financials that included offshore transfers, unreported holdings, and a line item labeled consulting fees, Caribbean. Never a good look. Page 43. The prosecutor said, holding up the filing, this wire transfer was routed through a shell corporation registered in Belize. And guess who's listed as a co-signer? He tapped the page. Ms. Miranda Vale. At that point, even her own attorneys looked ready to slide under the bench. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Then came the uppercut. Exhibit G. A silent partnership agreement, sealed but subpoenaed, naming Senator Harlan Boyd as a 12% beneficiary of Crown Ridge Holdings. Let me tell you, that courtroom didn't gasp. It exhaled like a dying balloon. You could almost hear CNN warming up the chyrons. Miranda froze. If looks could sue, I'd have needed 5 attorneys just to sit there. She whispered something to her counsel, who nodded like a man preparing for an unscheduled career change. The judge leaned back in her chair. Miss Vale, can you confirm the existence of this partnership? I want to plead the fifth, Miranda stammered. You're in civil court, Miss Vale, the judge said flatly. That's not how this works. Her voice dropped a register. But it will be how the criminal case works. Soon. The room broke into a symphony of murmurs, side eyes, and audible regret from HOA board members now realizing their president had been treating their dues like personal piggy banks. I turned and faced the gallery. The very residents who'd once yelled at me for ruining the neighborhood. I didn't come here to steal your homes, I said. I came to stop someone from stealing my family's land, and in doing that, I found out she stole a whole lot more from all of you. The judge banged the gavel. I will issue a ruling on ownership within 24 hours. In the meantime, this court is forwarding all financial records to the State Attorney General's office and the IRS. Miranda didn't move, didn't blink, just stared like the future had already rolled over her. She built her empire on sand and called it stone. The tide came in, guess who's wet? Outside the courthouse, I didn't speak to reporters. I didn't need to. The story was already writing itself. Residents came up to me, quietly, respectfully now, asking what happens next. And I gave them the truth. There's cleanup ahead, legal, financial, environmental, but I'm not going anywhere, not until every piece of this mess is settled. Some nodded, some cried. One man hugged me and whispered, "We thought you were the problem. Turns out you were the solution." And the best part? I hadn't even played my ace yet. Because when greed writes checks it can't cash, there's always one guy in the room holding the pen. And the ledger. The day the ownership ruling came down, I wasn't in court. I was at the old creek bed where my uncle used to park his lawn chair, cold beer in hand, daring the fish to bite. The ruling? Judge Eden confirmed what everyone already knew. Every home built on Crown Ridge Estates legally belonged to me. You'd think owning 110 homes would feel like winning the lottery, but honestly, it felt more like inheriting a zoo, with all the cages open. The media called it a landmark decision. The residents called it everything from justice to how the hell do I get my deed back? But I had a plan. I offered every homeowner the right to buy their house back at their original purchase price, minus all the junk fees, surprise assessments, and consulting costs Miranda had padded in like bad insulation. No one got evicted. No one got punished for buying a lie. That wasn't the point. The point was to rebuild what Miranda tried to bury, trust. And just to make sure nobody ever used my land as monopoly money again, I placed the mineral rights, including the helium reserves they'd drooled over, into a community trust. The profits go to local schools, scholarships, and emergency services. The next time someone tries to scam a rancher's will, the 4th graders in town will have a forensic accounting curriculum waiting for them. Danielle, who, let's be real, saved the entire operation, opened her own firm within 6 months. West Legal now represents HOA victims across 5 states. She's got waiting lists and whistleblowers lining up like it's a flu clinic in February. And you know what her first case was? Helping Connell Lewis, my old neighbor turned accidental hero, rewrite the Crown Ridge bylaws from top to bottom. Gone are the days of rubber stamp committees and shadow votes. The new rules? Triple signature authority on every major financial move, annual audits by third-party firms, and open votes with transparent minutes. If someone wants to install a bird bath, they better come with a budget breakdown and 3 competitive quotes. Connell calls it radical honesty. I call it common sense with a clipboard. As for Miranda, 22 years, no parole. She sobbed during sentencing, claimed she was just a misunderstood administrator with vision. The judge didn't buy it, the court didn't flinch, and the residents she defrauded? They packed the gallery like it was the Super Bowl. When the sentence dropped, one guy high-fived a stranger. Senator Harlan Boyd, meanwhile, resigned in disgrace 2 weeks later. Federal charges are still pending. Rumor is he's lawyering up with someone whose idea of a good day is 3 redactions before breakfast. The houses, surprisingly, held up. Turns out, when you strip out the corruption, stucco can stand tall. But the biggest shift wasn't architectural, it was personal. The residents who once glared at me now wave from their porches. Kids play in yards that used to be battlegrounds for petty fines and passive-aggressive HOA letters. The homeowners' meetings don't feel like trials anymore, they feel like potlucks. I still walk the ridge every morning. The wildflowers my uncle loved are gone, bulldozed in the name of progress. But last week, the community surprised me. A group of residents, led by Connell and Danielle, gathered at the edge of the property with shovels and seeds. No announcements, no flyers, just a quiet tribute. They planted rows of bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, and wild daisies right where my uncle's field used to bloom. And there it was, full circle. They came to plant beige boxes. What they grew was a movement, and from the ashes of corruption, a real neighborhood bloomed. So that's the story, folks. They thought they could pave over legacy, bury truth under stucco, and call it progress. But what they didn't count on was a forensic accountant with a memory like a vault and a moral compass that still points north. What started as one man defending his uncle's land turned into something bigger. A blueprint for fighting back when the clipboard crowd thinks the rules don't apply to them. And if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Corruption doesn't collapse with a punch. It collapses with paperwork, persistence, and people willing to stand up, quietly, steadily, and legally. Justice isn't loud, it's patient. Like wildflowers. You don't always see the roots growing until they bloom right in the face of every person who bet against them. So if you've ever felt small against a system designed to keep you silent, remember this story. Document everything. Ask questions. Protect your name like it's acreage. And when someone tells you that's just how it works, look 'em dead in the eye and say, "Not on my land." If this story lit a fire in you or maybe just gave you a little hope, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Share your HOA horror stories. We read every one. And if you love true-feeling tales where justice hits back with a clipboard and a smile, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We've got more stories coming, stories where the underdog bites back, and where the law is used the way it was meant to be, to protect the people who built this country acre by acre. See you in the next one. And don't forget, the wildflowers are coming back. So are we.